I never asked for your trust, child. Only your obedience. Sorin Markov, from Stone and Blood. Throughout the vast and infinite realms of the multiverse, there are few beings as ancient and as powerful as the vampire planeswalker known as Sorin Markov. Wielding both immensely powerful blood magic and masterful sword skills, Sorin has a reputation as a hedonistic yet deadly individual. Despite his detached and aloof attitude, and despite his nature as a blood-drinking vampire, Sorin still believes in the greater good. He aided fellow planeswalkers Nahiri and Ugin with capturing and sealing the Eldrazi, and created the mighty Archangel, Avacyn, to protect humanity on his home world. But Sorin was not always a vampire, not always a planeswalker, not always one of the most powerful beings in the multiverse. Thousands of years ago, on Innistrad, he was just the grandson of an alchemist in a region ruined by suffering. In the distant past, the region that would later become known as Stensia was under the effect of severe famine. Death and starvation were widespread, and the aging alchemist, Edgar Markov, took up the task of finding a solution. Seeking not just an end to the famine, but an end to mortality as a concept, Markov conducted countless dark experiments, eventually turning to demonic consultation to uncover the secrets he desired. After learning what he could from the demon Shilgengar, Edgar and his apprentices managed to trap an angel, Marix, within his laboratory. There, he committed the ultimate sin, draining the angel of all of her blood. With this, Markov was able to perfect a potion, a ritual that allowed him to transcend mortality to become something more. No longer was Edgar Markov a man. He had become the first vampire, the first member of a race of immortals that drank the blood of men. Overjoyed at what he had accomplished, Edgar would in turn hand this same gift, the gift of immortality, to his only grandson, the young Sorin. This ritual, and the transformation it caused, proved to be incredibly traumatic for the Markov scion. As he was changed from man to vampire, Sorin found his planeswalker spark igniting and was flung across the multiverse. As a vampire, Sorin had power beyond most mortals, but as a planeswalker, he wielded power that mortals could barely comprehend. For unknown centuries, he walked the worlds, largely carefree, doing as he wished without consequence. Occasionally, his journeys would take him back to Innistrad, where he would partake in the lavish feasts and parties held by his fellow vampiric lords. But all too often, he was out in the blind eternities, exploring new worlds, new experiences, new pleasures. One day, he came across a newly sparked planeswalker, Nahiri, a young core from the plane of Zendikar. Taking her under his wing, Sorin taught Nahiri about her new powers and status in the aloof way only he could. Still, despite his callous attitude, the two became good friends and would occasionally travel the multiverse together as gods. Eventually, however, they came face to face with a force beyond even the immense might of planeswalkers. They encountered the World Eaters, the cosmic threat, the scourge of reality. On an unnamed plane, one long lost to the multiverse, Sorin and Nahiri would have their first run-in with the Eldrazi. The two put their powers to work, valiantly fighting back against the Eldrazi brood in a desperate attempt to save the people of this world. Despite their immense power, each day the pair would find themselves losing more ground, more allies, and more of the world. Soon, Sorin and Nahiri found themselves being forced to flee the plane as the Eldrazi completed their annihilation, rendering the world and its few survivors into dust, then nothing at all. As the two regrouped on Zendikar, they found themselves approached by one of the few beings in the multiverse older than Markov, the Elder Dragon Ugin, with whom Sorin had worked before. Ugin revealed what he knew of the World Eaters to the pair, and divulged that he believed the Eldrazi should be imprisoned, not destroyed, in case they were part of some grander ecosystem. To this end, he petitioned Nahiri and Sorin for aid. A plan was hatched between these three. The Eldrazi would be lured to a plane and trapped, rendered inert. Though hesitant to offer up her home as bait, Nahiri eventually relented and allowed Zendikar to become the staging ground of this plan. Over the course of 40 years, the Hedrons of Zendikar were built to lure in and trap the Eldrazi. While Ugin guided and Nahiri built, Sorin was out, traveling the multiverse, reporting on the Eldrazi and helping to lure them, slowly, towards Zendikar. When the Eldrazi arrived, they wreaked devastation across the world. The Eldrazi broods scoured the land, threatening Zendikar and its people, but the plan was successful. The trap worked. The Eldrazi Titans became bound to the world, and the Hedron prison caused them to become inert. Nahiri would become the warden of the Eldrazi, with Sorin and Ugin vowing to return should their prison ever weaken. And with their great work done, the three went their separate ways, with Sorin eventually making his way back home to Innistrad. Returning to the plane of his birth, Sorin was appalled to learn of the state mankind was reduced to. The vampires, in their bloodlust, were hunting more and more aggressively, threatening the human population. And should the humans perish, it would only be a matter of time before vampires turned on themselves and became extinct as well. To prevent the total loss of life on his home, Sorin came to the conclusion that drastic measures were needed. First, Sorin was inspired by the work on Zendikar and, taking what he learned from Nahiri to heart, the vampire took a piece from Innistrad's silver moon and crafted it similarly to the Hedrons his allies created. This chunk of silver would become known as the Hell Vault, and it would serve as part of the protection Sorin created for his world. It served as a prison, within which the great enemies of Innistrad could be locked, much like the Eldrazi. But the Hell Vault and its magics only accounted for half of the protection Sorin desired. Though there was need to lock away enemies, there was also need for a guardian, a being mighty enough to not only protect the people of Innistrad, but the plane itself. As a vampire, Sorin was strongly aligned with black mana, but this guardian, this protector, would need to be a holy being, one that could watch over, inspire, and empower the humans of his world. The specifics are not known, but creating this being would be taxing indeed to Sorin. He gave up something, and weakened himself greatly to forge into reality an angel, one mightier than any other. Avacyn, the new protector of Innistrad, was born, and she was mighty indeed. Avacyn's appearance served to immediately bolster the humans, and a church quickly sprung up around her worship. The priesthood spread, and Cathars and Inquisitors rose up, now empowered to protect the people from the monsters of the night. For his act, Sorin found himself ostracized by the vampires of Innistrad. Though he crafted Avacyn to help keep balance and prevent the extinction of all life, his peers could only see her as a direct threat to their feeding, and so Sorin was banished from Markov Manor, disowned by his grandfather, and hated by all vampires on Innistrad as the Great Traitor. But this mattered little to Sorin. Thanks to Avacyn and the Hell Vault, life on Innistrad would endure. But more immediately, his act of creation left him extremely drained, and he needed to recuperate. He descended to the place he had created Avacyn, a simple chamber beneath one of the churches. And here, for unknown weeks or months or years, he rested and healed. Something had disturbed his rest. Someone had entered Innistrad, someone powerful enough to rouse Sorin from his slumber. Though he had not yet recovered, Sorin rose. Though it was an arduous task, he departed to meet with this visitor. And to his surprise, Sorin found Nahiri, his old friend and companion, examining the Hell Vault. What joy there was in their reunion, however, was cut short when Nahiri revealed that the Eldrazi had broken their bonds, that she had sent out the call for aid, and that she alone had imprisoned the World Eaters once again. Surprised, yet calm, Sorin explained that it was possible that his protective spells could have prevented the signal from reaching him. Nahiri, furious, demanded that Sorin return with her to Zendikar to uphold his oath and to help ensure that the Eldrazi were still secure. And Sorin, prideful despite his weakened state, refused. A battle broke out between the two. In the centuries since they last met, Nahiri had grown in strength and become a true force of nature, while Sorin had given up too much in his creation and had not the strength he used to. Nahiri gained ground, overpowering Sorin until a third entered the fray. Avacyn, Sorin's creation, appeared as a bolt of moonlight, catching the core off guard and attacking with the full might of her divine power. Initially confused and defensive, Nahiri nevertheless began fighting back against the angel. And though Avacyn was powerful, she was not yet fully realized, and it was here that Sorin intervened. He could not allow Avacyn to come to harm, not so soon after her creation. Markov stepped in front of his former protege, holding back his creation. With one apology, Sorin pointed his blade to Nahiri, who was unknowingly backed up against the Hell Vault. In the next moment, she found herself pushed into the silver prison, was swallowed up, and disappeared from the world, trapped. The next 1,000 years would pass relatively uneventfully for Sorin. With the Mending, many planeswalkers across the multiverse found themselves growing weaker. But thanks to his vampiric nature, Markov lost relatively little. Occasionally, he would step in when new planeswalkers appeared on Innistrad to inform them, in his own threatening manner, that he was the Lord of Innistrad and that they should tread carefully on his world. It was a novel life, traveling about, seeking new ways to indulge himself. But it all came to an end one day, when Sorin sensed something from Zendikar. Over the millennia, the Hedron network had grown weaker, and the Eldrazi were starting to stir. Most importantly, however, was an incident that occurred at the Eye of Ugin, the center point of the network. Thanks to the machinations of Ugin's twin, Nicol Bolas, the planeswalkers Jace Beleren and Chandra Nalaar were led to the Eye, where Ugin's servant, Sarkhan, awaited them. A battle broke out between the three, and the mystic lock in the Eye was triggered when Ugin's Ghostfire was used by Chandra. This, as well as the presence of 3 planeswalkers, served to weaken the network further, allowing the Eldrazi broods to manifest once again. Sorin, making good on his ancient vow, returned to Zendikar. Unfamiliar with the world after so long, and unable to fly due to the hectic mana in the air, he met up with a local, the elf Nissa Ravain, to set out for the Eye of Ugin. Their journey was long and perilous, with their party growing to include the likes of Anawan the Vampire, the insane core Samara, as well as some goblins. Along the way, Sorin informed Nissa, who was also a planeswalker, of his duty. He told her about the Eldrazi, the Titans, and his oath to keep them imprisoned in stasis on Zendikar. However, when they finally reached their destination, Nissa would betray Sorin. After discovering that he was, in fact, a vampire, and believing that the Eldrazi would simply leave Zendikar should they be freed, Nissa broke the central Hedron, the keystone of the Hedron network and the final failsafe keeping the Titans imprisoned. Though initially furious, Sorin chose to wipe his hands of the business on Zendikar. Even as Nissa realized her mistake and the Titans rose to devour the world, Sorin departed to handle affairs elsewhere. Briefly, Markov returned to his home of Innistrad, only to learn that Avacyn, his guardian angel, had gone missing. Before he could begin the search for his lost creation, Sorin encountered and battled against the fiendish planeswalker Tybalt, whom he easily crushed. In the meantime, Avacyn had returned, and so Sorin departed, having business elsewhere. He next made his way to Tarkir, the world favored by his old accomplice Ugin. Since the Eldrazi were free, and Ugin had not returned to Zendikar, Sorin had grown curious about the dragon's fate. After a journey to the north, accompanied by an Atarka warrior thrall, Sorin found the Hedron cocoon within which Ugin slumbered. Sacrificing his thrall, Sorin awoke the dragon from his 1,000-year rest and informed him of what had occurred on Zendikar. After thanking Sorin for his aid, Ugin inquired into the whereabouts of Nahiri. Markov was hesitant to talk about their companion, but Ugin was insistent, informing Sorin that the work on Zendikar needed Nahiri. And so, Sorin departed for his home of Innistrad again, to the Hell Vault where Nahiri lay imprisoned. Unbeknown to Sorin, however, was the fact that Nahiri herself was freed in the same moment that Avacyn returned to the world. In the same time that Sorin had been traveling around the multiverse, Nahiri had returned to Zendikar to find it under assault from the Eldrazi. Grieving at what she saw as the loss of her home, and rendered slightly mad by her centuries in the Hell Vault, Nahiri vowed to take vengeance on the one she saw as the source of her grief, Sorin Markov himself. By the time Sorin had returned to Innistrad to seek out Nahiri, her machinations were already underway. The Lithomancer assaulted Markov Manor, Sorin's ancestral home, imprisoning its inhabitants in stone. Nahiri created cryptoliths, manipulated leystones that warped the mana of Innistrad and directed the ley lines towards a central point, a temple she had created with the aid of the ghoul caller Gisa. These cryptoliths served to summon and direct Emrakul, but they had another effect as well. By warping and corrupting the very mana of Innistrad, Nahiri's artifacts and the nearing Eldrazi had a maddening effect on the people of the plane, especially on beings closely tied to the world's mana, such as angels, such as Avacyn. The Archangel, the protector of mankind, would be driven insane as a result of Nahiri's actions, turning her spear towards the very people she once defended. Only able to see the innocent as twisted monsters, her fury erupted. Leading a corrupt church, Avacyn began a fiery and destructive purge, one with seemingly no end in sight, as she sought to burn away all evil she saw on Innistrad. As Avacyn burned the cities, Sorin implored Olivia Voldaren to aid him in battling Nahiri. The vampire lady agreed to march her bloodline with Sorin to battle the Lithomancer, on one condition. He must slay his creation and put an end to this madness. Sorin found Avacyn in the Cathedral of Thraben, the location of her creation. Here, he intervened when the Archangel was attacking Jace and Tamiyo. Though he cared little for their lives, Sorin urged Avacyn to come and speak with him. For even though he agreed to destroy Avacyn, Sorin was reluctant to do so. He knew that if he could just take her below, to the very spot she was formed, then he could fix her, undo the madness Nahiri inflicted upon her. Avacyn, for her part, refused. She attacked Sorin, though she was surprised to find that, no matter how hard she tried, she could not wound him. As Avacyn struggled with her own sanity, and as Sorin casually destroyed the angels she directed to attack, the ancient vampire relayed to her the truth. She could not harm him, for he had created her. As they fought, going further below, the truth made more and more sense to the insane angel, and she found herself seeing Sorin for what he was, the creator of all evil on the world. If she was the cause of so much human suffering, then he was the cause of her. Avacyn lashed out, finally managing to injure a surprised Markov, who came to realize she was now beyond saving. the Archangel taunted Sorin, claiming that if he could not kill her, then he'd have no choice but to imprison her. After all, what cannot be destroyed will be bound. But Sorin solemnly rebuked her. "But Avacyn," he said, as he pointed his blade at the angel, "you can be destroyed." In that moment, he performed a simple spell, one that undid all the magic holding Avacyn together. Ancient gifts were revoked, blessings vanished, and as she began to fall apart and die, Avacyn had one last, final moment of clarity. "I can only say to you, in this, my final prayer to the world, that I only ever meant to keep the innocent from harm. I am Avacyn. I am to protect." These were the final thoughts of the Guardian of Balance, the protector of humanity, Sorin's gift. Kneeling in the very spot she was formed, Avacyn, a divine being driven mad, was unmade by her very creator, the ancient vampire, Sorin Markov. Sorin, in his grief, could not even bear to look at the angel as he performed the deed. For Avacyn, to Markov, represented everything that he had done to keep his world safe, his goal to keep balance, his desire to do good. Avacyn, Sorin's gift to the world, was reduced to ash. Consumed by anguish and fury, Sorin left the ruins of the cathedral and regrouped with Olivia and her army. Together they assaulted Markov Manor, where Nahiri lay in wait with her cultist followers. While the vampires slaughtered the cultists and mutants the core had rallied, Sorin battled with his former protege directly. For Nahiri, Sorin was a traitor who had gone back on his word and doomed her world. For Sorin, Nahiri was a monster who forced him to slay his own angel. Neither could feel mercy for the other, and neither would relent. The vampire was ancient, powerful, terrifyingly skilled in both swordplay and magic, but he was arrogant, prideful, and, perhaps, distracted by his own grief. Nahiri was able to outplay and overwhelm Sorin and, in a mirror of their battle 1,000 years prior, she took him and imprisoned him within a wall of stone. Nahiri would taunt her former friend about the fate of Innistrad before leaving, planeswalking away. Sorin, trapped, found himself at the mercy of Olivia Voldaren, ever the opportunist. While he pleaded for freedom, she took his sword, the parasite blade, and mockingly proclaimed herself Lady of Innistrad. And while he watched, Olivia departed, and Emrakul, the final Eldrazi Titan, appeared on the horizon. While Sorin had no hand in the battle, Emrakul was eventually imprisoned in Innistrad's Silver Moon, and the monsters created by her presence were destroyed. Eventually, Sorin would carve his way out of the wall he was trapped in, just in time to be lured by the interplanar beacon to Ravnica during the War of the Spark. Here, Sorin was trapped alongside other planeswalkers by the immortal sun, as Nicol Bolas put his plans in motion to harvest their sparks. Sorin cared little for Bolas, his army, or the other Planeswalkers. Instead, when he learned that Nahiri was on Ravnica, he set out to meet her. Nahiri and Sorin clashed across the city, battling each other with a ferocity few others could manage. Eventually, however, the two were convinced to put aside their feud and aided in the battle against Bolas. After the end of the War of the Spark, Sorin returned home to Markov Manor. He isolated himself in the ruins of his birthright, his fury giving way to depression. Lamenting the loss of Avacyn, the ruin of all he had done for his home, Sorin became a bitter and solitary creature. Even as the threat of eternal night loomed over Innistrad, he cared not. When Arlinn Kord and her allies came to the manor, they did so seeking the Moonsilver Key, which was essential to activating the Celestus and reversing the shortening days and colder nights. Sorin, no longer caring about the wider world, refused them. Arlinn attempted to change Sorin's mind, reminding him of what he used to stand for, the good he tried to perform. But all the werewolf did was manage to infuriate the vampire, who attacked. But then Sigarda, the last archangel of Innistrad, appeared, summoned by Arlinn's prayers. For her own reasons, she wished to talk with Markov, and so she battled with the vampire, buying precious time for Arlinn and the others to escape the manor with the Moonsilver Key. One of the most ancient planeswalkers, Sorin is also one of the most powerful. Centered in black mana, though with access to white, he specializes in devastating blood magic that allows him to drain the life force of others. He is also quite skilled at mind control and the use of curses, and possesses a number of vampiric abilities such as flight. Sorin's power is great enough that few in the multiverse are his equal, and, with a simple snap of his fingers, he is able to render lesser beings into dust. In battle, he wields the Parasite Blade, a sword that feeds off the mana of those it strikes. Sorin is an exceptionally skilled swordsman, able to defeat several Voldaran duelists in seconds. Sorin Markov debuted all the way back in the original Zendikar set, and has received several more cards over the years. As one of the most prominent planeswalkers in the story, it's doubtless that he will get a new card in the future, nor is there any doubt that he'll get more story focus. After all, Innistrad Crimson Vow is right around the corner. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like or sharing this video with your friends. If you subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell, you'll be alerted whenever I upload new videos. If you have a topic you'd like me to discuss, feel free to let me know in the comments section below. Finally, if you'd like to support me directly, well, I've created a Patreon for this channel. If you like what I do and want to help me out, go check it out. A link to it will be in the description below. Thanks again, and have a great day.